Before we get started with this week's episode, I just want to give a quick shout out to the We Are Southampton page on Instagram. For matchday edits, polls, competitions, and more, be sure to check out We Are Southampton on Instagram. Matt, who runs the page, did the logo for this show. He's been a guest and a supporter since day one. So head on over to Instagram, check out We Are Southampton. The link is in the show notes if you need it. And now, here's the show.
Lovely ball for Pella. Onside. 1-0.
Подача. Остин! Все-таки забил.
Fonte with a snoopy header. It's
2. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans. My name is Matt Markstone. I'm the host of the show, and whether you are a new or returning listener, thank you so much for joining us. We have a special episode this week. Episode 20 at the end of last season, we kind of talked to a bunch of people from different places around the world, different Saints fans, to get a kind of a handle on what everybody made of the season, and decided on this international break at the end of the transfer window to go ahead and do that again, looking back on the transfer window. So what we've done is we've gone out and we've talked to 5 different people. Some you'll recognize, some you've never heard of. And what we'll do is we kind of just ask them to grade the club's transfer business, to give them a grade A through F, and then explain kind of what went into that decision and why they feel that way. And we'll ask some follow-up questions along the way. And I just want to give a special thank you to everybody who participated, everybody who agreed to give me their time and talk with me. It's hard to do. It's hard to coordinate. It's hard to condense some of these topics down to a manageable amount of time so that we're not listening to a 5.5 hour podcast. And special thanks to those people who tried to make it work and we just couldn't quite work it out. We'll get you on the show at some point if you are still interested. So I'd like to thank everybody for that, and thank you for listening. And I really hope that you enjoy it. And to get started, we're going to go ahead and start in Australia. We'll just go kind of in order of recording because sometimes I kind of build back on previous comments. So we're going to go down to Scott Shenton in Australia, in Perth, Western Australia. He's not on Twitter, but you can find him on Facebook. You can look him up. He's in all the Southampton kind of groups, and we'll hear his story and what he made of the transfer window. So we'd like to welcome Scott Shenton to the Southampton Delivery Podcast. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's great to be here and great to be talking to you.
And we've been communicating via email for I guess a month or two, just talking about the podcast and stuff. And so this seemed like a pretty good opportunity. Haven't had anybody from Australia on the podcast, so kind of nice to talk to you. But you have a kind of a connection with the Saints, and so do you mind telling us a little bit about that before we get into the transfer window stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I've been a Saints fan all my life because my father was a Saints fan. He was born in Godalming in Guildford in the UK, and he spent a lot of time living on the Isle of Wight and would catch the ferry over for Saints matches. So he's always been a Saints fan, and I sort of had no choice but to be interested in it. And I guess when I was sort of at the age of getting interested in soccer and knowing more about it, sort of 7, 8, 9, was around the time that Matt Letizia was playing for the Saints, and he was scoring worldies every week, and it was hard not to be excited by watching him. And so he was certainly my hero growing up as a kid, and his loyalty to Southampton wasn't lost on me. Even though I was a young kid, I realised how important he was to us, and that if he ever left, I mean, he basically single-handedly kept us up from relegation year after year. And I know that he could have taken bigger offers from other clubs, but he stayed loyal to the Saints and kept us up. And I'll always be grateful to him for that. And I was lucky enough that he came to Perth quite a few years ago. He was caddying for a golfer in a golf tournament over here, and he did a speaking evening and did a question and answer night, and I got to meet him, and I got to tell him how grateful I was that he stayed loyal to us. And he was very, very humble and very generous with his time, and he was it was awesome to be able to meet him. And through that evening, also met a famous Saints winger from the 60s and 70s, John Sydenham, who happened to live in Perth. And he happened to be my dad's hero when he was a kid. And we made friends with John, and he was kind enough to give me a few contacts. And I moved to the UK in 2004 for a year or so. And being able to mention John's name in Southampton opened a lot of doors for me. I was able to get into training sessions and got to do tours of St Mary's and meet players and things like that. And so that's my connection with Saints. I'm just a massive fan, and I feel a bit of a fraud being on here because I don't write for Read Southampton, or I don't have a podcast or a blog or anything like that. I'm just a big fan, and I watch the games every week, and I follow closely on the internet. And there's not many Saints fans in WA. There's about 30 of us, and I see them occasionally at the pub. I see somebody wearing a Saints shirt and get to talk to them. But other than that, it's just talking to my dad about Saints. So it's great to be on your podcast talking to you about them today.
We've been talking for a while before we started recording, and it's been wonderful. So I appreciate you taking the time to do that.
Yeah, no problem.
And just so I have a little bit of reference, how you say there's about 30 people in WA. So how big is that?
So there's 2 million people that live in Western Australia. Yeah, and there's about I guess 1.5 live in the CBD, and there's probably 500,000 to I guess 500,000 that probably live in sort of rural Western Australia because it's quite a big state.
Okay.
And there's 30 of us, and we have a small Facebook page. So if people are going to the pub, they post on there, and people can know where they're going to be if they want to meet up with other Saints fans to watch the match. But other than that, I wear my Saints jerseys out and hope that occasionally, and it happens occasionally, that someone will see it and come up and say that they're a Saints fan and talk Saints, which is nice, but it's quite rare.
Yeah, I know your pain a little bit. But on this week's episode, we're kind of looking back at the transfer window. It's closed everywhere, including Australia. So we're kind of looking back on the club's kind of just on their overall kind of dealings this summer, both in terms of who went out, who came in. Give me a grade like A, B, C, D, F, and I'm a teacher, so I think that works. And then kind of just explain why you think that. So looking back on the transfer window, kind of what's your take on how the board and how the club did as a whole?
It was a funny transfer season. It felt like we were in the news every day, but not much was happening. Overall, I reckon I would give us a B+ for our transfer window, and I think a lot of people would probably think that was quite high. But at the beginning of this transfer season, my main objective was to keep Virgil. That was the thing that I wanted more than anything, and I thought that was the thing that was most important because, because he's our best player, he's very good. We probably can't get a comparable player than him to come play for us. And the fact is, he was on such a long contract that if we sold him next year, we would probably get the same transfer, if not more. So there was really no point selling him. It was almost like having a free hit to have him for this season. And I think the board made that decision early. And I think that with Les Reed and Ralph coming out early and saying they weren't going to sell him, and then I believe that they told the manager when they were signing Pellegrino up that they wouldn't sell Virgil. I think they felt that they had to keep to their word, regardless of Virgil throwing the toys out of the pram. I think they had to keep him, and I was very impressed with the way they handled it. I think we needed to sort of grow up as a club and draw a line in the sand and say, we're not going to get bullied by these big teams. We're not going to be a selling club. We're going to keep our good players if we want to and sell them on our terms. And I think it was really important that we did that because I think a lot of teams saw us as an easy target. And I give full credit to Les and the board for standing strong. It wasn't easy, I suspect. They were under all kinds of pressure, and they held firm like they said they would the whole time. And whether Virgil plays or not from here on, I think it was for the betterment of the club going on from here, to be honest. So that's the reason I give a B. The reason I wouldn't give any higher than that is because I probably would have liked an extra striker or a number 10 to come in. But the other reason I give a B is because we were able to sign players from Juventus and Lazio, which, 5-10 years ago, I could never have dreamed that we would be buying players from big clubs like that, good players. And they were players that were better than what we already had in those positions. And we were able to buy them for decent fees. We haven't overspent. I mean, I think both of them we really got a bargain, to be honest with you, with Lemina and Hoyt. If Johnny Evans is being valued at 30 million, to get someone of the quality of Hoyt for 13 to 15 million is just a bargain. So Les, people criticise him, but he's done a good job in that sense, and he's managed to find bargains where other teams haven't seen them. And I mean, people like Sadio Mane, nobody'd heard of him, and somehow Les pulled him out of the Bundesliga for 10 million, and we were able to sell him for 35. And he's an absolute gun for Liverpool now. It's a shame we had to let him go, but that's kind of the way our club's going to have to operate now, because we just don't have the money to invest vast amounts and spend huge amounts on salaries. We want to run as a business, and I think that's the way that they sort of have to go, is to try and find these gems. And I think they've done that with the ones that they've bought, to be honest. I think Bednarak could be good in the future. He's got a good background. He looks like he's a good size. So overall, to be honest, apart from the striker and the number 10, I've been happy. My only concern with the transfer window is that because of that, if Gabbiadini happened to get a long-term injury, it's hard to know where the goals would come from. Ideally, what we want to do is somehow find a scientist that could meld Charlie Austin and Shane Long into one player. And that would be perfect for us. I think if we could have, Shane Long's athleticism and speed combined with Charlie's finishing, we'd have a very good player on our hands. But unfortunately, at the moment, they're two different players, and Charlie seems a little bit slow at times, and Shane's finishing isn't the best. So Gabbiadini, even if he stays fit, isn't going to be able to score the goals on his own. He's going to need some help from midfield, and so players like Redmond and Buffel are probably going to have to lift their rating slightly and start knocking some in the net, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think that's a fair assessment. I think that, kind of at the very beginning of the window, the board, at least publicly, never wavered in their stance on VVD, and whatever happened behind closed doors, if they were, as far as I know, no offer ever came in. So there really wasn't anything to discuss. It was just dealing with him and trying to get him kind of on board. And now they're saying that as of, I think on Monday, he'll be back in training and we'll be kind of going forward. So hopefully that's the case. And, for the entire time that I've kind of been following the team, we have been the team that has sold all of our best players, and people I don't think quite trusted the board that we were going to hold on to Van Dijk. And I didn't want to say anything publicly in terms of, making fun of Liverpool fans or anything until the window was closed. I didn't want it. If I would have done it at 10:50 and we would have sold them at 10:55, I would have been pissed. So,
me too.
So the fact that we've managed to hold on to him and to, now it's going to be about, can we manage him and get him back on the field? Cause I don't think he does anybody any good if he's not playing,
I'd be shocked if he doesn't come back into the fold and play for us. I'd be shocked if he sat out for 6 months to a year, especially in a World Cup year. I can't remember a major player at a major club sitting out for a long time. Maybe Carlos Tevez might have done it for Man City many years ago, but it just doesn't happen anymore. It's not good for his career. It's not good for his PR, and it's certainly no good for his international chances. I just can't believe that he would sit out. It would totally shock me. I assume that he just comes back into the fold. There might be a few boos, unfortunately, to start with, but he might just have to cop that on the chin because of the way he's acted.
Right.
But if he comes in and he starts putting a shift in and he plays well for us, I think it'll all soon be forgotten very quickly, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think if he comes in and plays and is the same Virgil that we saw last year and the year before, no issues whatsoever. If he comes in, and kind of comes back the way and plays the way Jose Font did after the Euros, then we'll have issues. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, then they'll definitely be booing.
Yeah, and if he's playing that badly, it's understandable because it's probably more about the way he's playing than anything else. But so you're welcoming him back kind of with open arms and saying let's do it.
Absolutely. I mean, he's such a good player and he's so important to us. And to have him and Hoyt in the back would make a very good defence for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I consider him one of the best centre-backs in the world at the moment. And I don't think we'll come across players of his calibre playing for Saints very often. So the longer he stays with us, the better. I mean, if I had the choice between accepting $100 million for Virgil or having him play out his contract with us and then him leaving for nothing at the end of that, I would gladly have him play for us for the next 5 years and have him leave for nothing than take that $100 million, because I think that he's way more valuable to us than that money that we would receive for him.
Yeah, I understand that. I think I tend to agree with you. And you kind of look at what some of the other teams are doing in terms of that. Arsenal didn't let Alexis Sanchez go. They're going to forego $70 million for maybe 6 months, maybe one more season. And because he is that good. And I think they were actually, if they would have signed Lamar, they would have gotten rid of him, but it didn't quite work out. And I can understand them choosing to hold on to him and making him play. So, so you're giving him a BB plus for this window.
Yeah, I think so.
And then move.
I think people will think that's high, but what do you think?
Maybe B minus.
Yeah.
I'm not too far off, simply because I think, like you said, standing firm on the Virgil van Dijk situation represents a change in kind of how the club is functioning, and I think that's positive. They've also gone out and addressed kind of the center back situation for the long term by bringing in Hoyt and Bednarik. We have a really good midfielder in Lamina. But like you said, we didn't get the attacking players necessarily that we need. And even with all the chances we created last year, the finishing's not there. And I don't know if the players we have can do it. I think they can, but it's getting to the point now where it's been a season and they're going to have to start doing it. Otherwise I can't keep thinking they're going to,
Definitely.
But given the grade you've given the board, what, if this is a summative grade, how can they improve that going forward into January? What can they do to? Is it just bring in the number 10 and the striker?
Yeah, for me, I'd be happy with that. To be honest, I think that's the areas of weakness. Maybe another winger would be good. Basically, we just need more goals out of midfield. But where you get them from, I don't know, and particularly in January, where you get them from, because in January you typically have to overpay to get players, and the markets just spike so much in this transfer window as it is. I just can't see us paying the big amount plus extra for an overpay to get someone who's better than anyone that we already have. And then it's also an issue of wages as well. So I'm not sure where that player will come from. I don't think it'll be in January. I'll be shocked if we sell Virgil in January, because we traditionally don't like to do business in January. And if we had to buy a replacement, it's going to cost us extra to do so in January, and teams don't necessarily want to give up players that are really good. So I think Virgil will stay for the season. He'll just have to suck it up and get on with it, really. And I think that they will try and find a bargain, or they will just sort of keep their ear to the ground and try and come up with something if things don't get better in terms of goal scoring. But if not, I think we're probably going to have to stick with what we got and go into next year. But my concern is that if somebody gets injured in the striker department, I was really surprised that they sent Gallagher out on loan, because if somebody does get injured, we really only have Charlie and Shane Long. Even in the academy, I don't know who else we've really got that could come in and play a role, because even Ola Mola went out on loan.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm starting to feel like I regret us selling J-Rod, to be honest, right now, because I think he could actually have been a player that, particularly with what he's done with West Brom so far, could have been a player we definitely could have used.
I kind of thought he was going to go, and I thought he needed to go just for his...
Yep. So did I.
But I understand and see we are kind of short in that department, and let's face it, neither Charlie Austin nor Gabbiadini stayed fit all year last year. And
no, that's it.
And that leaves...
If they both get injured, it's just Shane Long.
And that's all that is pace. That's it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I just can't see him scoring 20 goals to keep us competitive. So
no.
And then literally, who else is there?
I don't...
We'd have to play one of the academy guys, and I just don't think they're quite ready for that step up yet. But.
No. I mean, if you've seen, I don't know if you've seen any of the under 23s, but they don't look particularly convincing.
No.
And they're playing the second division even. So
yeah.
I hope I hope somebody comes along, and you never know. Maybe I don't know, but maybe Gallagher has that thing where we have the ability to recall him, mid-season or whatever. But
they'd want to hope so.
Yeah. Yeah, really.
Because I think he could be good. I saw him play last year a bit for Blackburn, and he looked good. He's big and mobile, and I think he could turn out to be a decent player for us eventually.
All right. Well, so overall, it sounds like you're pretty. You're at least you accept
content.
Content. There you go.
Yeah, I'm content with what we did, and I think Lamina and Hoyt have been good signings, and keeping Virgil was great. As long as Gabbiadini doesn't get injured, it should be okay.
Yeah. Just hope for health here.
Hope for the best.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really do appreciate it.
No problem. It was great. Anytime.
And I want to ask you one more question. If you talked about Letitia coming down to Perth to caddy for whatever it was.
I can't remember who it was.
If you could caddy for one player on the Saints team, past, present, who would it be?
That's a good question. I think it would either be Kelvin Davis, because I think he would be funny and have some funny stories, and he seems like a bit of a practical joker. Or it would be Francis Benali once again, because I think he'd have some good stories and he seems like a good guy.
My only concern with Davis is that you might wind up like that Sky Sports or BBC reporter with the big purple. We won't say what it is. But...
Yes, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yes, indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that's not. No, I think he would be. That's a pretty good. It's a pretty good choice there. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
I think it'd be fun. Yeah, absolutely. Who would you pick?
I don't know. We kind of asked some questions about, going to I was talking to Aiden Small about if we took, you had to go to a music festival with somebody. He said Charlie Austin.
Yeah.
And I just said,
I don't, that was a good answer.
I don't think I can hang, I don't think I can do that.
Yeah.
And
did you say Yoshi?
I did. Just,
I think that was a good answer.
Well, I don't know. Cause I'm pretty boring, I guess. And I think I could, the golf course tends to get a bit out of control for me if I let it. Yeah. So, I don't know. It would probably wind up, I don't know. I'm thinking about people just on the squad currently. And I'm afraid that some of them wouldn't be very good, and I wouldn't want to, I'd be really embarrassed for them. But that's somewhere where somebody like Charlie Austin probably would be fun. He's probably decent. I think he plays anyway. And it would be a good time, and it's only 18 holes, and I can survive that. It's not 3 days and no shower, so
that's right.
I can do that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I guess Charlie Austin would be fun for that situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, like I said, thank you for doing this, and hopefully we'll talk again.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. It was great.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you next time, and thanks for coming.
Great. No problem.
And once again, that was Scott Shenton coming to us all the way from Australia. I hope you enjoyed kind of his take on things. I really enjoyed talking with Scott. We were talking for a much longer time than you got to hear on the podcast, but it was fantastic, and hope he had a fantastic Father's Day. It was Father's Day in Australia on Sunday, so hopefully he enjoyed that. And Now we're going to move on to a season ticket holder, a voice you may recognize, maybe trying to place it with a face. He frequents the fan cams after the games on the Ugly Inside TV. So we're going to talk with Hasan Tariq. You can find him on Twitter at Hasan Tariq 10. And I'd like to remind you that everybody we talk to, their Twitter profile or their Facebook profile, links are in the show notes. So be sure, if you're interested, click, friend, follow, all of those things. So Hasan, you're on Twitter at Hasan Tariq 10. Tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you became a fan, and then we'll get into the transfer window.
Yeah, I'm a student. I'm 19 years old. I'm studying at the University of Southampton. I was born in Southampton, lived in Southampton my whole life. I remember as a kid, I remember looking out from my bedroom window, I could see St Mary Stadium. And, ever since a kid, I knew I was going to support this great club. It means a lot to me. And not just me, just me, but to the local community and the city as a whole. So, yeah.
And anybody else in your family, Saints supporters, or are you kind of on your own there?
Well, my father's worked at Southampton Docks. He's a huge Southampton fan, as well as my brother. But unfortunately, we've got a few Liverpool fans in my family as well.
Oh, no.
My two other brothers are huge Liverpool fans. And I guess we've had a bit of banter this summer regarding Virgil van Dijk.
Yeah, seriously.
Every summer's a different story with us lot. So, yeah.
I mean, do you ever just pass your jerseys on to them and they just wear them as as Klein and Mane and everything else?
They, in a way, they have a soft spot for Southampton, living in the city. It's just a huge shame they didn't support them. But they're really interested in watching Southampton. When you look at the likes of players like Klein, Lallana, Lovren, Mane that have joined Liverpool from Southampton. They share a huge interest in Southampton,
Yeah.
I say to them, I've got a free Southampton ticket going today. They're the first ones that want to go and watch the team. They have a real interest in Southampton, for sure, and the players that we're bringing in.
Well, yeah, because they want them eventually.
Yeah.
It's like, they could just start watching Celtic and then we'll just, they could just cut us out of it.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, thank you for doing this, and I appreciate it. And what we're trying to do this episode is just kind of get a rating for the club or the board on their transfer window and their dealings. Yeah. And so I'm a teacher, so we're trying to go like a grade A through F, and then kind of you decide the rubric why you gave them that grade. So if you had to grade the board, what would they get for their business this summer?
So I'm finding it very hard. I can't criticize the board. They've been brilliant this summer. They really have been. They kept Virgil, which if you had told me in May that we would have kept him over the summer, I would have laughed at you. They brought in two quality players, Wesley Hoyder and Lemina. I know the other player, Jan Bednarek, he's comes across to me as a player for the future for the club, and I think he'll get to learn of two brilliant players in Van Dijk and Hoyder. So overall, I've been very pleased with the board. I can't really fault them too much, to be honest. Over the summer, we said we wanted a bit more attacking football, and okay, they haven't brought any attacking players in, but what they have done is they've changed the manager. They've brought in a manager who's promised us attacking football, and I do honestly believe he will deliver. So I've been very pleased with the board this summer. Over the last few years, I've been very frustrated where they've sold our best players, but I'm very, very pleased with what they've done this summer, and they should be very proud of themselves.
Like going into the summer, did you think it would be another summer of selling all of our players?
Yes, I did. Just based on our track record, if it goes as far as back as the 2014 summer, when we sold Chambers, Lovren, Shaw, Lallana, and then the 2015, I think we sold Schneiderlin, who was one of our best players then as well.
Uh-huh.
And last summer we got, with Yama, if we knew to leave, Pele, Mane, probably you could arguably say our three best players for the 15-16 season.
Yeah.
So, I just thought that, especially with a lot in England, a lot of news speculations, your players are leaving in the gossip columns on a daily basis. So, I just thought we'd probably lose Virgil van Dijk, who was one of our best players. Really, really pleased that we've managed to keep him.
Absolutely. And I don't think you're alone in thinking that even when the board kind of came out and said, we're changing course a little bit, we don't need to sell, we're financially in a better place. I don't think anybody kind of believed it because the history says otherwise. But I think with the board kind of being upfront and at least publicly remaining strong throughout the entire transfer window, I think that is something we should definitely give them credit for. But as you said, we didn't maybe address, I think, what people think is the biggest need, in that we didn't find that attacking player, that possibly that winger or that central attacking midfielder to really kind of push us through the next level. Do you think we have to do that in January? Or do you think that's something that's next summer? And do you think we just kind of go with the players we have now for the year?
I do think the club were looking to bring an attacking player in. You know, I remember in the back end of last season, we were linked with Sigurdsson. I think what's happened is just the prices have just gone completely bonkers. You know, for a really good attacking player, you're talking 40, 50 million. I think we saw Sigurdsson go for 45 million. And, you know, Southampton aren't the sort of club that are going to throw that sort of money at players. And I think that the players they have brought in, they haven't spent too much. I think that the price range has just been absolutely bonkers, that the club decided, look, we can wait until January. I think we can wait until January, to be honest. Regarding a creative player, I think we have created a lot of chances lately. You know, we had 29 shots against Swansea. Unfortunately, the right chances aren't falling to the right players. Remember against Swansea, Yoshida missed a sitter. And just last weekend against Huddersfield, our best chance fell to Ryan Bertrand in the 90th minute. Just the right chances aren't falling to the right players. But I see the team are working hard, and I do believe it's not long before we start scoring on a regular basis.
Yeah. And I tend to kind of believe that. I think I've been hoping that for a while, and I just hope that it finally kind of comes true. You know, like eventually you have to think, you keep creating the chances. Eventually they have to go in, you know, it just, I don't really want to get into expected goals and all that stuff, but, you know, it'll be what it is. But in terms of Van Dijk and keeping him, are you going to be welcoming him back kind of with open arms, or are you kind of, are you reluctant to kind of maybe give him a warm welcome when he comes back immediately?
Well, I think he will get a cold shoulder from a lot of the fans, understandably why after his actions. He's hurt me, and he's hurt, I think, the whole entire Southampton fan base. But I think a lot will forgive him, and I personally will forgive him. He's a brilliant player, and it's very hard to keep a player of that calibre out and in the cold for that long. I think Virgil is the sort of player that will, with him in the squad, will win us 10 to 15 points more than without him in the squad. And I just think he's just too good of a player to keep out. Does he need to apologise openly? Yes. I think the first person he should start with is Maurizio Pellegrino. You know, he's coming to the club, and I don't think Virgil's made his life any easier. So I think he will be entered with open arms. I think it's just a matter of when he starts playing. So we'll wait and see.
Yeah. I kind of hope, that the Netherlands turn their qualifying around, because I think if they qualify for the World Cup, it will be more pressure on him to perform. Whereas if they're not going to even be around this summer, it'll be slightly less pressure on him. So I hope they do that, and he kind of realizes he's got to come back and play for us, and hopefully he gives us a good year. And I think with that center back pairing, whoever is there with him, I think he, like you said, he makes us just a lot better. So yeah, but if I had to ask you to give them an actual grade, A through F, what would you give them? The board.
I would have liked them to bring in another attacking player, but I can understand why. Maybe a goalkeeper they could have brought in to maybe test Fraser, because we both know these last 12 months he's been, I would say, poor, very poor. And I think him not getting called up to the England squad shows that. So for them to get a grade A for me, they would have had to bring in an attacking player and a keeper. But despite that, I'm gonna give him a B.
Okay.
Because I think we've got a really good squad. I'm really looking forward to the season.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment, and I think for a lot of people, the Virgil van Dijk kind of standing firm on that and keeping him at the club was almost the biggest factor in how the board was going to be judged this summer. And I think they addressed the long-term issue at center back. They went out and got, I think, a Premier League ready partner for whoever is there, whether it's Van Dijk or Yoshida or whoever, or Stevens. And then we also went and got Romeu, a proper kind of partner, to sit alongside him and kind of do the box to box stuff. So I'm overall pretty happy. But like you said, maybe one more attacker, a winger, a number, I don't know if it's a number 10 or an attacking midfielder, that would have been great, but you can't have it all the time. So
yeah,
overall, I'm pretty happy with how it's gone. So, any kind of final thoughts from you on the window?
Well, not really. I think for us to really judge the window, if you'd probably need to ask the question in Christmas time, because we need to see how Wesley Hoydet do and Lamina do, and how Virgil sort of fits back into the team. Is he still got that 100% commitment to the club? And it will show on the pitch, I believe, whether he's still committed to the club or not. And if he's not, then you'd probably say, why didn't the club sell him? And if the players that we brought in don't fit in and perform, you might say, why did we bring them in? Because brought them in for big money, 18 million. I believe Lamina was brought in for.
Mm-hmm.
I think Hoydet was also brought in for a similar fee. So I think you could probably judge this window in a few months' time. Window's just finished. Current feeling is good, but we'll have to wait and see how the players we brought in are doing, and also the players that have gone out as well. For example, if Jay Rodriguez goes on and does amazing at West Brom,
right,
some fans might raise a few eyebrows and say, why did we sell him? So you've got to look at both sides, but I'm happy. I'm happy, but I can wait and see.
Yeah. I think that's fair. Well, thank you for coming on and doing this. I really do appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
And
thank you very much.
Maybe we'll get together and do like a full length thing at some point down the road.
Yeah, definitely. I'll look forward to that.
All right. Thanks, man. Have a good day.
You too.
And we'd like to thank Hasan again for joining the show. You can find him on Twitter at Hasan Tariq. He's also on Facebook. And hopefully you'll be hearing more from him in the future if it all works out. And now you're going to hear the voice of somebody that you probably will recognize. And if you listen at all to the Saints FC podcast, you know that John Bailey, who is our next guest, interviews players. They look at the match, he and his co-host. But that show is really focused around talking to people who used to be at the club, people who surrounded the club. And it's just a really kind of unique insight into the club, and something that we don't really have with any of the other podcasts that are out there for our club. So, John, welcome to the show. I know we can follow the show at Saints FC Podcast on Twitter, and I know we can listen on iTunes, Lisbon, and pretty much anywhere else you get your podcasts. So anybody out there who hasn't taken a look at the Saints FC Podcast, I would encourage you to do that. But John, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much, Matthew, for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Pleasure.
Yeah. We've kind of been chatting back and forth for a while every once in a while, and I enjoy the podcast, and it's nice to hear from former players and all that stuff. So thank you for doing that. And if you would just kind of tell us a little bit about where you're from. I guess most listeners probably already know that, yeah, because if they listen to yours, then they know. So anything you haven't mentioned on yours that you'd like to mention here before we jump into the transfer window?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I guess, yeah, maybe if they've listened to the very first episode of the Saints FC podcast, they'll know a bit. But yeah, the reason that I support Southampton is because my great granddad played for the club many, many years ago. We're going back to like 1901, 1902. And yeah, when I got into football, my granny was like, "Oh, well, you're into football now. You should have a look at this." And she got out these old photos and stuff of him, these black and white dusty things, and it was just like, wow. You know, he played for Southampton. He was manager of Wolverhampton Wanderers and played for, I think, for Gillingham and Shrewsbury as well. But yeah, at the time, Southampton had Matt Letitia, so the choice was obvious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, thanks for coming on the show and doing that. And today, basically, we're just going to kind of look at the transfer window and say, what's the grade you would give the club for their business, and then you kind of get to decide what that is and what aspects of the business were most important to you to kind of come up with that rating. So if we start with kind of the grade, if you had to give it A through F, and it's kind of an archaic teacher grading system, but what would you give them?
I guess I'd give them a C, although I think kind of grading a transfer window, like on the, 3rd of September today as we're chatting, is a bit like giving someone a grade when they've walked out of their exam and just you've asked them how it went, because you really don't know how good or bad the business is or was until we see what happens, with Mario Lamina, Wesley Hoot and Jan Bednarek. I guess it's a C from the early perspective. I think Lamina's going to be a great asset to the club. I just have a good feeling about him. He looks like he's going to be a really strong, powerful, box-to-box midfielder, the kind of person that we need in the team. Wesley Hoot and Jan Bednarek, I'm just not 100% sure about either of them yet. I think Wesley Hoedt has a kind of mixed reputation when it comes, if you speak to people about the Italian league, like he was never really able to establish himself in the first team. And that concerns me a little bit. And the other thing that I guess kind of concerns me about the fact we've brought in 2 centre-backs is I think Maya Yoshida and Jack Stevens have both been brilliant. I think Yoshida looks really composed on the ball. He's turned into a much better player. And I think Stevens has got really, really great potential. And there's a little bit of worry for me that, let's say Wesley Hoedt is slightly edges ahead of Stevens in the pecking order. Perhaps that means Stevens doesn't get the opportunity that he should. And I don't know, I kind of think with Stevens, if we gave him a little bit more time, he could really turn into one of those really classy centre-backs. A bit like Van Dijk before he got injured and then threw all his toys out the pram. He can see a pass, Stevens. He can come out of defence with the ball and start attacks from it. And that is something that's really exciting, gives you an extra element.
Right.
When you're playing a game and one of your centre-backs starts to move forward with the ball, suddenly the opposition have a problem because they've got an extra player in attack that they weren't really prepared for. And so, that's when you start to see space and, plenty of options for players to move around and get that ball. So, yeah, I think Stevens will be great at that, but I guess, we'll have to wait and see if like Hoedt and Bednarek and who gets the starting positions, especially once Van Dijk comes back into the first team squad as well.
Yeah, you do kind of worry about his because he's developed so much over just a short period of time with the first team that if he now there's the chance that he kind of it slows down or stops completely if he's not getting into the team and being able to kind of play in game situations and progress. So that is a concern. How important was it to you that we held on to Van Dijk versus selling him to Liverpool or anybody else?
I think at the start of the transfer window, that was the most important thing, and that's why I think A to C grade is pretty good. So, I've given them a C. I think keeping Van Dijk is good news for the club. I think it sends the right sort of message out there. The way it's gone, and the way Van Dijk has behaved has, soured the whole thing quite a lot, really. If you look at some of the other players that have been fishing for transfers but haven't got it, Riyad Mahrez keeps on, being held up as an example of someone who's playing well, committed. Obviously we know that, there's been other players in the Saints squad who there have been rumours going about and, they've managed to still play well, play in the team. And, I think Van Dijk has probably done a lot of damage to his own reputation. And I just worry about what sort of atmosphere that's kind of, created within the side and within the first team squad. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see how it goes. Schneiderlin did exactly the same thing. Wanyama did exactly the same thing. And then they both managed to reintegrate themselves into the team. So, hopefully it'll be okay.
Yeah, you hope that he can put it behind him and kind of focus. And you hope that the rest of the team kind of just can look at it and say, all right, that's done, and now let's focus on what we have here and just play. But moving forward, kind of into January, if you look ahead, what can the board or the club do to kind of improve that grade during that period?
I just think we need more options up front. I don't think that we've replaced Pella properly or Lambert. That kind of big centre forward role. I think Charlie Austin, he's a great finisher. He's a decent player. He will get you goals when he's in the right positions on the pitch, but he doesn't add that kind of extra element, in terms of the way that you can play the game. You'd look at kind of Ricky Lambert and Graziano Pella and they gave you something different. So if you had, Pella up front, if you change him over for a Shane Long, you suddenly change the whole dynamic of the way your attack works, or if you get them playing together. So I think, Gabbiadini, Austin, Shane Long, I think we need a big kind of centre forward there. I've heard that Ricky Lambert's actually available for a free, and God knows what's happened to him since we sold him because his career's gone on a, nosedive down. But I would genuinely be tempted just to bring him in on a short-term contract, maybe see what his fitness is like, see if he can get that kind of sharpness back.
Yeah.
Because he offers something different. And I wondered if they were going to be using kind of Sam Gallagher in that sort of role this season and trying to get him trained up and ready for that. But, they've loaned him out to Birmingham, who I'm sure will be a car crash in the Championship with Harry Redknapp as their manager.
Yeah. That's I don't know how that's going to go. But I don't know. Anything else that you kind of think about the transfer window in terms of anything else stand out to you?
Not really. I guess the whole saga has really been about Van Dijk, and it's been boring, to be quite frank.
Yeah.
I like to kind of, type in Southampton into the Google News and have a look at, all the talk that's going on, because I'm interested in what's going on in the club. But every time you've done that over the last kind of like 3 or 4 months, it's all about Van Dijk, and it's just so boring. I think we've known for quite a long time that we weren't going to sell Van Dijk, yet the media just kept on recycling the same story over and over and over and over and over again. So in terms of my own personal enjoyment of the summer transfer window, I found that really, really boring. And I was in the pub with a couple of mates for the England match on Friday. And one of them's a Tottenham fan, one of them's a Liverpool fan, and they're both really excited. Oh, what a fantastic transfer window this was! So they found it all exciting. But I don't know, as a Saints fan, I find that all the rumours that you read tend to be ones of your best players leaving. So I hate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we've got to give Les Reed some kudos for he said he wasn't going to sell Van Dijk. They didn't sell Van Dijk. We've brought in, a bit of strength and depth in defence. We've got, what looks like a handy player in Mario Lemina. I think, we're maybe missing something up front, but I don't think anyone's particularly too sad about the players that we've sold. I think, Jay Rodriguez, I would have loved to have seen get back to his old self, but, who knows if that's going to happen. I hope it does. I genuinely really, really like the guy, and the way he plays football is fantastic. So, I hope it works out for him at West Brom, but ever since his injury, things haven't really been the same for us with him. Right.
Now, when West Brom come and visit St. Mary's, who do you think gets a warmer welcome? Jay Rodriguez or Van Dijk when he steps back on the field?
Jay Rodriguez will get a much warmer welcome.
I was afraid you were going to say that, but I think you're right. I agree.
Yeah. There's absolutely no question about that. I mean, it's going to be interesting with Van Dijk. I remember when Schneiderlin did something very similar. I think the first game I saw him play after he came back into the side was at Upton Park against West Ham United away. And he scored, I think, 2 goals that day. And that's kind of what Van Dijk needs to do. As soon as he comes back in, he needs to make a really big contribution. He needs to play really, really well and demonstrate to the fans that he does care, and that he is a professional and he will do the best he can for Saints. If he has a couple of dodgy games or it looks like his heart or his head's not in it, I think his relationship with the fans is going to get pretty poor.
Yeah, I think there definitely is that risk there, and I hope it doesn't go that way. I hope he plays well, and I hope his head's kind of in it. So we will see.
It's going to be hard work though, going back into that training room and back into that club, having said all of that on Twitter.
Yeah,
I mean, he just comes out looking like a complete plonker.
Yeah. Now, when you do your guys' podcast, you have a co-host, but often your podcast is kind of focused on interviewing kind of former players, or people kind of surrounding the club and doing that. If I could ask you, what's your dream interview? Who do you most want to interview that you haven't had on yet? And then maybe one current player that you would maybe like to talk to at some point.
Well, I mean, Matt Le Tissier is the obvious one. You know what? I'd actually really like to get a former manager on. I think that would give a different insight. The players will have a particular experience. Obviously, I'd love to interview Matt Le Tissier. I think he's maybe the most wonderful football player I've ever watched. But yeah, to get a former manager would be really interesting. Nigel Adkins, I'd love to interview because, he had 2 really, really great years at Southampton, 2 promotions, and then was quite callously moved on by the Southampton board. So I think he'll have, it would be an interesting, topic for an interview.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I hope that you're well, and thank you for taking the time to do this. And I wish you and the podcast and all that stuff all the best.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Matthew. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Once again, thank you to John Bailey for joining the show. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at SaintsFC Podcast. You can download it wherever you get your podcast, so be sure to check it out. They got a lot of interesting analysis, as well as, like I said, those interviews with former Saints players and things of that nature. So I hope you enjoy that. I really appreciate John taking the time. He was actually cooking lunch while we were doing it, cooking some pork. So I had to think about that at 4 a.m. while I was talking to him. If you heard it in my voice, it was very, very early. So that's all good, though. And now we're going to go ahead and talk to a very special guest, someone that I have been helped out very much by, someone who I have been encouraged by, someone who is... I think all the guests that I talk to are fairly special, especially after I talk to them. But this is a guy you will recognize. His Twitter handle is Saints in France, and although you may not recognize his voice, he was kind enough to share a few minutes with me and talk about the transfer window. So Robbie, welcome to the show, and thank you once again so much for joining. I just really appreciate it.
No problem, and lovely. Thanks for having me. Absolutely lovely to come on.
Oh, my pleasure to have you. And so if I can ask, what part of France do you live in?
Normandy.
Okay.
Very near to, right on the Normandy coast, sort of along the beaches where the D-Day landings, maybe half an hour from St. Malo.
Okay.
So yeah, sort of, really, you can almost hear Southampton when St. Mary's cheers really loud, and the wind, wind is in the right direction. And
I know you've made the trip over a couple times. And how long does that take you to get there?
Well, normally because my daughter, she's 9.5 now, but she's a mad Saints fan. So there are a few cheap routes, but when I go over, because I have to have a cabin with her, normally I travel from St. Malo. So you're looking. I think it's about a 10-hour crossing.
Oh wow!
Set off in the morning. Normally land. I think it's about 7 o'clock at night.
Okay.
And then when you sail back, we sail back about 8 o'clock at night. Land early in the morning.
That's a long time. That's a long trip.
It's a long old trip. Her first ever game, luckily, was the great Liverpool comeback. Half time, we were 2-0 down. She was sat there, tears in her eyes, and I said, "Come on, keep the faith." And then 3 goals go popping in. It was quite amazing because we were right down in the corner by the Liverpool fans.
Uh-huh.
At half time she was mortified. And come full time, she was stood on her chair singing back at them with all the other fans. So
that's awesome.
It's a hard game to live up to, because the very next match I took her to was the West Ham game last year. At which point she's like, "Daddy, why didn't we win?" And I'm like, "Football, sweetheart, get used to it. It's Southampton."
Oh man. Well, I guess kind of looking at the team, how would you kind of judge our transfer business this summer?
I know before on the questionnaire we had a sort of an A to Z with respect to how they've done. In terms, if I can break that into two, and I'll explain why I'm breaking it into two. In terms of the transfer window with respect to the club and what they've done, personally, I've got to say it's an A for effort. And I'll explain that to you, because I'm sure you won't mind me saying, but I've had a contact with Les Reed a couple of times during this window, personal contact, and I know for a fact that we've had several transfers that have fallen through, which as a club, because we do things under the radar very much so, always have done, I know for a fact that if they'd have happened, that the overall mark would have been higher than what I'm going to give them. But you can't account for a player like Ross Barkley getting halfway through for a medical,
mm-hmm.
And then walking out and going home. So with respect to everything the club's had to deal with certain players, as we know, let's not mince words with Virgil and that situation. I think in terms of effort, I'd give them an A. Overall, personally, I think it's got to be a C, because there are elements that I think we should have addressed and we haven't. So yeah, A for effort, C overall.
In terms of those, the overall score, and I was unaware of, kind of like you said, that we do a lot of business outside of the public kind of sphere, so we don't see it. But in terms of what we did get done, the C, I think, is pretty fair. I think you consider, for me at least, the fact that we didn't sell Virgil, that's a plus. The fact that we did get some long-term defensive replacements, I like. But what areas do you think that we needed to address that maybe we didn't?
Well, the biggest element that I think that everyone would agree with is the side that at the moment we just don't seem to be scoring enough goals. I would have liked to have seen a very strong attacking winger, goal-scoring winger come in, and an out-and-out striker. But like I say, I know for a fact sales have fallen through, and those are the two areas I would like to have seen addressed. Defensively, I think we're covered. I think we could put all our defenders on that we've got. We could play against 20 guys and keep a clean sheet because we've got so many now.
Right.
But like I say, we need to be scoring goals, and we need to be attacking. So yeah, I think an attacking winger, very strong attacking winger, and an out-and-out striker, I'd like to have seen come in. I'm pleased with the defenders that we've got in, and I'm pleased with what we've got already. I think last season, one of the good things was the fact that several players came through due to injuries, etc. Stevens, people like that, and they've done superbly well, and they will continue. They will continue to grow. Yeah. In stature.
Now, with that C grade now for the window, and of course it kind of depends on how those players kind of pan out. But as we move forward and get towards the January window, do you think the team will address the striking concerns there? I've heard arguments kind of both ways where, it's a window that maybe we don't like to spend money in because things are more expensive already and the market's already inflated. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, basically, so we've got 4 months. The manager's new, and as much as people say, well, he's had a whole pre-season. In football, when you look at football and you look at management, let's just go to Ferguson at Man United. The guy was 1 game away from being sacked, and look what happened there. It's not an overnight thing. We look at the way Man United have started this season compared to the way they were last season, and it's gonna take Pellegrino a little while to get going. And I personally feel that we need to give it 4 months. We need to give it this 4 months. We need to see what's going to happen during that time. I could sit here now and say we need A, B, and C, but that makes me some kind of mind reader, and I'm not. It's one of those situations where we need to gauge how the team moves forward now. We need to see how it gels. We brought Lamina in midfield. He's settled straight into the team. We could not have got a bigger, stronger guy to come in to play as it's transpired. It might not have worked that way, but it has. So in respect to that, I think we need to give it another sort of 8 to 10 weeks, see how the team progresses, and then say to ourselves, right. Because Saints are always looking. They've always got that black box full of names. So with that in mind, yeah, the January market is always inflated. But if we get to January and we're not scoring goals, then we do have to invest. And if we have to invest money that's inflated, then maybe for once Saints have to take that view.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we need to give it a little bit of time.
And the one thing that really was in the news for us all summer was Van Dijk, and it's really the only thing that I think Sky Sports wanted to talk about. And us not selling him and him kind of doing everything that he did. What do you expect for him when he comes back to St. Mary's? Do you think he's welcome back, or do you think he's given kind of maybe a rude welcome?
If I was speaking for myself personally, I think if I'm totally blunt, I'll be totally blunt, and I will be honest. I think the way he's treated the club and the way he's treated the fans is fairly disgusting, to be honest with you. There's a way to act as a person, and there's a way that you behave and the way you treat the people that pay your wages. I'll jump on to the next point quickly, but I will move back again. Whoever is playing for us, I do not believe they should be mistreated when they're out there on that pitch. They shouldn't be booed. They shouldn't be, at the end of the day, if they're playing for the club, then as supporters, we support them. And that's my view. If I'm at St. Mary's and the guy's got the ball and he plays a good ball, I will be cheering him. If he plays a bad ball, I won't be booing him or giving him extra grief, because everyone makes mistakes. There's very few players in this world that do not make a mistake. And if he's playing for the club, then all well and good. If he refuses to play, then fine. The one thing that he's achieved is he's given a lot of ex-Liverpool players that are a little bit out of the limelight lots of extra cash and appearance money for getting behind Liverpool and helping them with their quest to sign a new defender. But personally, if he's playing and he's doing the business for the club, then I'm fully behind it. If the ultimate result for me, because this is going to cause a problem, because there are people, and I fully respect their opinion, that aren't going to be happy about him being there. Mm-hmm. To be honest with you, if I had my personal opinion is, if on the last day of the window, Barcelona, Inter Milan, anyone came in from abroad and said, "We'll pay the money," I would have taken the money. It wouldn't have concerned me, because I do feel that this will cause derision between the fans, which is quite a shame, because there will be people I can see it now. After the first match, he comes back and plays, if he plays. There's going to be people saying, "Oh, he was rubbish," and blah, blah, blah. And then there's going to be people, that they booed or they didn't boo. And we don't need that at the moment. We're in the process of building under a new manager, a few new players coming in, and we really need to, after last season with the problems we had, I think this season needs to be one of coming together, giving everyone a hug, and moving forward, and hopefully successfully moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You have any other thoughts? Because I think you did a really good job of kind of putting that all in perspective there. Do you have anything else you feel like needs to be said about the window?
I'm not overly sure. I think we've done some good, quiet work in. I would like to mention, Jack Rose has come in from West Brom. I watched him playing goal for the under-23s on a stream. I do feel that he is an absolutely brilliant find. Having seen him play, I'm fairly surprised that West Brom released him. I'm very, very pleased that Matt Tiz and his 73 management placed him with Saints, because I think the guy looks superb. I think he is a real find for us coming in. With respect to players going out on loan, it's going to do them the world of good. We have to remember that they're playing in a lower league than the Premiership. But, Reed, Ryan Seeger, he's doing great at MK Dons. I think they will come back better and stronger players for the experience. But with respect to the window, I think we don't get me wrong, I'd love to have seen us buy a 50, 60 million pound striker who was absolutely worth, if they were worth that money, it would have been fantastic. But you can't find them anymore, because the money's gone ridiculous. And when we're finding players like Lamina for around the 14 million mark, that, with all due respect, that give it a season with us playing like he has started off, the guy's going to be worth a hell of a lot more than that.
Right.
He won't be, but in terms of the market, he will. Yeah. So, the players, to me, the value of the player is what he provides the team. It's not the price on his head. That is where, the money with everyone's been talking about Van Dijk. At the end of the day, the guy wants to move on. He wants to play at a high level. Fair shout, but give it your all for the team. Give it a Morgan Snidely. The guy, Morgan, he did the same. But he was unhappy. He made a tweet. He had a chat. He got on and gave us an amazing season.
Right.
I really, personally, my personal feelings are I don't think we're going to see that from Van Dijk, but I'm hoping to be proved wrong.
Yeah.
Very much so. I'm hoping that when I come over, I'm hoping to get over 2 or 3 games this season, and I'm hoping the guy's at the back, he's leading the defence, and I can clap the guy and cheer him as much as I always have. But sadly, I can't see it coming. But we'll see. I'm hoping to be wrong.
I hope you are too, but we'll see. You mentioned kind of the 10 hours or so that it takes for you to get from your place to St. Mary's or to Southampton. So if you took that trip, you in the front seat driving, your daughter next to you, if you could have one former Saints player in the backseat and one current Saints player in the backseat to spend that time traveling over with, who would it be?
Wow. Oh, wow. That's tricky. I'll tell you what, let's pretend I've got a 5-seater, okay?
Okay.
Because in the back, I would, without a doubt, I'd have Matt and Franny Benali, because the banter between those two guys is great. They met at Southampton. They're both Saints legends, And to have them sit in the back, I really wouldn't want to talk to them. I just want to listen to them, to be honest. That would be my choice in the back seat. Maybe put Nipper in the middle to wind them both up a bit to get them to go at each other. Front seat passenger, current team. I think Oriole. I mean, the guy has normally got a permanent smile on his face.
Yeah.
He works hard. I mean, you can tell he loves playing for us. And, I think I'd like to have him in the front because he smiles a lot more than Ryan. and I'm sure Ryan would be very great company, and I'm sure that he'd have lots of nice things to say, but I like to see the players with a smile on their face. And now Yordi's gone on loan. The second biggest smile at the club has got to be Oriole. So,
yeah,
him front, Nipper in the back, keeping the peace between Matt and Franny. That would be the three.
That sounds like a good car trip for me. Sounds like a good road trip.
Yeah, it would be fun, I think, yeah.
Well, Robbie, once again, I want to thank you for doing this. I really appreciate your time.
No, I tell you, it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, I don't usually like doing these, and I've really enjoyed it, and thank you very much, Matt, for having me.
My pleasure, and you're always welcome to talk on or off camera. So,
fantastic, yeah. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
No problem. Take care.
And once again, that was Robbie. He's at Saints in France on Twitter. A special thanks to him for joining the show. He doesn't always do this type of thing, so I feel extremely honored to be able to have him on. It was really, really great to be able to talk to him, and I really hope you enjoyed his perspective on the whole transfer situation. We have one more guest for you this episode. You will recognize his voice. He is the host of the Total Saints pod. Ben Stanfield normally gets to converse about Saints with a number of people, but most often now with Adam Leach, who writes for the Southern Daily Echo. But they're not doing an episode this week, so Ben had to settle for me. So if you don't follow Ben on Twitter, it's at Ben Stanners, and you can also follow the Total Saints podcast at Total Saints Pod. So be sure to get over there and check those out. They have new episodes almost every Monday, and they are a fantastic piece of, I guess, audio journalism or discussion or podcast, whatever you want to call it. So one more perspective for you, but Ben, we'd like to welcome you to the show. Thank you for taking the time to join us, and I can't wait to talk about Southampton in the transfer window with you.
It's good to be here, Matt. Yeah, looking forward to it. Listen to a lot of the podcasts that you guys are doing, and hoping I can add some value and significance. I'm having the week off this week, so it's nice to come on and talk to you and at least feel that I'm still getting my chance to talk about Saints. Yeah,
absolutely. That is what this is all about for me, is learning about stuff and talking about Saints and all that. So you're currently not living in London or in Southampton or in England even. You're kind of over in Scotland. So can you tell us a little bit kind of about your link to Southampton and how you became a fan and all that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Southampton born and bred. I've got thick Hampshire accent still, and I'm proud to be a Southampton lad, Matt. I born there in 1981. Without boring everyone, I moved up to Scotland in 2010. So just before Nigel Adkins took over at Saints, actually. So I sort of consider myself inadvertently a bit of a lucky charm, because they've obviously done very well ever since I left the region. So it's a bit of a weird one. It's cost me an arm and a leg to go back to watch them. But look, I'm a proud Southampton lad. It's always been my team. My family have a long history of supporting them and growing up and watching them and such, like right through the sort of 20th century and into this one. So it's part of my life. I think I said in one of my recent podcasts, we all have red and white blood cells for a reason, and I think that's the way I feel about it. Is that it's that sort of relief you get at the end of every week of being in the office and being able to share some of the frustrations with fans like yourself right across the world now. I mean, it's amazing how social media has sort of helped us all interact with each other and talk about Saints and grow and such like. And there was one thing actually I was sort of thinking about the show and what I could add, and I came up with a little anecdote which I thought was quite a good link between myself and you and your pod, which was my great granddad, actually, a guy called Captain Kearley, was captain of the Calshot tugboat, which used to go up and down Southampton Water, pulling a lot of the liners. And sort of late 1930s, early 1940s, one of the liners that he was responsible for tugging up and down Southampton was the original Queen Mary liner. And the Queen Mary, as you're probably well know, Matt, now is based at Long Beach there in Los Angeles. So I thought, even talking to you on the other side of the world, there's a good little link between me and Southampton and my family and sort of your base and such like, really. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And we've actually launched kind of from there for a cruise we were on, I think once or twice. And, you get to see it and you can take tours of it. And so that's awesome. It does kind of sound like you did more research for this than I did. So I apologize. But thank you. And so your family's been there kind of forever, and you still manage to go back for some matches at least. I don't know if how often it is, but what's that trip like when you head over?
Certainly, I try to get back as much as I can. I was at the Swansea game opening day this year, which was obviously pretty dull. But I think, for me, it's an hour on an aeroplane. It's really not that bad. The biggest issue I have is that obviously, like a lot of fans that are trying to travel to watch Saints, is the frustrations around television these days. I mean, the fixture list comes out and you think, right, I'm going to pick a game, hypothetically, Leicester, end of November, that's the game I'm going to go to. But you can't really book flights and travel and things like that for maybe a month before the game, because Sky or people like that suddenly decide that they're going to move the game to a Monday or something like that. So that's been one of the sort of frustrations, I think, of being in the Premier League, is that, when you're in League One, the fixture list came out, that was the fixture list. You knew that you were going to be going to Carlisle on the 23rd of October or something like that. Uh-huh. So the biggest issue I have is that, the cost obviously goes up in that time. So you could book a flight maybe 3 months before, whereas if you're having to wait to 3-4 weeks before the actual fixture, the travel is a lot more expensive. So I don't get to go as much as I maybe want to. I've got 2 little kids as well, so I obviously want to spend time with them. But look, it's an hour on the aeroplane. It's great to catch up with all my friends down there. My brother, my dad both got season tickets, so they go every week as well. So look, I try to get down there as much as I can, but the good thing about being in the top division these days is you can generally find some form of compliant or uncompliant link to watch the game on these days anyway. So I don't miss any of the games. All I miss is obviously the sort of social element and the atmosphere of St Mary's, really.
Right. Yeah. I've talked to people before. It's kind of difficult to have a lot of camaraderie on the West Coast, because most games kick off at 7 a.m. So, there's I know there's at least 4 or 5 of us all the way up and down the coast that are up watching, because, we get messages and you see tweets and stuff. But, if half the time at kickoff, if I take a picture outside, it's still pretty dark and too early to have a pint. So that But just kind of what we wanted to do here is it was a good chance to talk with you and just get your ideas on the transfer window. So looking to get like a little bit of a grade for the club or for the board based on their business, and just A through F, where would you give it, and then kind of what criteria went into that as you made that decision?
Yeah, fair enough. Look, I've tried to be positive through the whole sort of process, really. I think there's some fans that are, I used the word the other day, a fantasist in terms of the money we should be spending, the players we should be signing, names pulled left, right and centre. Reflecting on it, I think I appreciate and have always appreciated that we're trying to run a sustainable football club here. So it's not about spending hundreds of millions of pounds. We're never going to do that. Grade-wise, Matt, I was trying to be positive, so I thought rather than going C+, I would go B-.
Okay.
So I've gone B-. And the reason for that is, look, we've made 2 decent signings. Wesley Hoyt's obviously come in from Lazio. Lemina's come in from Juventus. Obviously, they're both settling in and will take time to get up to speed. But Lemina was a record signing, so we've broken our our transfer budget again this season. We've broken our transfer record. So we are spending money. Obviously, some fans want to see us spending 30-40 million pounds. That's never going to happen. So I think we have to be realistic. The issue, and I've seen this mentioned a lot within Saints fans, and I totally agree, and I've said this on my podcast, is around goals. And I still feel, from a negative point of view, that we didn't deal with the attacking midfielder position that we needed. Someone in the hole, potentially someone that can score 10-15 goals from midfield and such like. So I think there is a gap there that we missed. I think I heard we were trying to get Vieto in from Spain quite late in the day, but it didn't quite happen. So I don't think there was any doubt that they were looking for players. I think we were obviously linked with Patrick Roberts as well, who eventually went to Celtic. So I don't think it was a case that they weren't looking for attacking midfielders, but I think it was just that they couldn't do the right deal within the timescales. Again, that's fair enough. If they're being charged ridiculous money on wages or agents' fees or whatever to get someone in the door, then they're never going to do that anyway. So it's not like we haven't got attacking midfield players, but for me, that's still a niggling gap. You look at the Bufels and the Tadiches who aren't really delivering at the moment. That's still something that I think we could have done with. And the final thing I'd say is my understanding was, as of 3-4 weeks ago, that the whole strategy around our strike force was that Jay Rodriguez had been moved on. I agreed with that decision. I think he needed a fresh challenge. And the whole point of giving Sam Gallagher a new contract was that he was going to be our fourth striker and a chance to actually put some pressure on Shane Long, Gabbiadini and Charlie Austin. And suddenly we've shipped him out now as well. So we're now back to being left with the three strikers that we had last season who, between them, didn't do very well in terms of goals. And I wonder if we're going to have the same challenges now up until January of trying to stick the ball in the net. I mean, we've played 4 games this season already and we've not scored in 3 of them. So that's an issue that I don't think has been dealt with. So look, being positive, I don't necessarily want to dwell on the Virgil van Dijk situation. We may speak about that in a minute. But in terms of ins and outs, I think we've done okay. Could we have done more? Yes. Could we have done worse? Probably. So all in all, B-.
I think that's totally fair. And definitely that attacking midfielder role, we don't have a whole lot of goals coming from midfield. It seems like they're few and far between. And if the strikers can't get it done, then we have to worry. And I kind of believe that Tadic can do a lot better than he did last year. But I keep saying that, but unless he starts to deliver, then I eventually have to kind of go, well, maybe I'm wrong in that assessment, and maybe he overperformed for a few years, and now he's kind of regressing back to where he is. But I still like to believe that he is good enough to get it done. So hopefully, and I think like what you said about Gallagher is him moving on and going on loan. I think that does show that they were probably looking elsewhere and thought they were pretty close if they're going to allow him to move on and leave us with 2 strikers who struggled with injury last year, and then Shane Long, who is mostly pace and getting older. So we could be in trouble, but I like to hope that we're going to be okay.
The thing is, they are well renowned for being a club that plans very well. They got Wesley Hoedt in from Lazio on the proviso that if they kept Van Dijk or if they lost him, they still had someone at position. So, we got caught out at the start of the year when we sold Fonte and then didn't replace him and had to panic into getting Martin Caceres in. So I'm surprised that they would have let Gallagher go without having someone to come in, and they may well have felt that they were close. I mean, again, I won't mention names, but I've heard of a couple of players that they thought they were very close to signing that then went elsewhere this summer. That may have been the case again. So I'd be surprised if Saints hadn't planned for someone to come in before Gallagher went. What happened with that? Your guess is as good as mine. But It's certainly a gap there. I think that we all agree, has put the pressure back onto those 3 strikers to now deliver.
Yeah. And looking at the VVD situation, it's been discussed over and over and over and with other guests for this week too. But how much of us retaining Van Dijk went into your kind of grade, be it positive or negative?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a positive. Look, I mean, my view is, as I said this on my podcast recently, in the nicest way, I don't really care if Virgil van Dijk doesn't pull on a Saints shirt again. I find it very hard to believe that that won't happen now. I think the fact he is staying, I can't imagine for a minute now that he is not going to sort of think, right, if I want to get a move to a club, arguably a club better than Liverpool, more successful than Liverpool, then I need to get my head down. I need to get back on the pitch. I need to start performing again. Football fans, I mean, I've seen the likes of Matt Letizia say it on Twitter, Matt, and he's right. I mean, football fans are pretty vain. I mean, we love a boo, but we love a cheer as well. And if he gets out there with a shirt on, starts performing again, fans are quickly going to forget what's happened. Whether that, I think he's been poorly advised. He's obviously, at any point, he could have stopped that process if he really wanted to. So I don't think any of us doubt he wanted a move, but the fact is, it didn't happen. In terms of going back to the grade, look, I've tweeted recently saying that I'm proud of how Saints have dealt with it. I'm absolutely proud of that. For me, it was probably one of the pinnacle moments in our sort of recent history about not letting player power and agent power win. Because if we'd said, look, fine, okay, yeah, we've had enough, off you go. I mean, what message would that have sent to, any other player in this window or January or next season? They would have known exactly what to do, to throw the toys out the pram, go on strike, refuse to train, etc., and they get their moves. So, look, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens the next couple of weeks in terms of Van Dijk coming back, whether he comes back, whether he decides he's still not mentally right. But in terms of the way the club have dealt with it, for me, I think Les Reed deserves a heck of a lot of credit this summer. I know for a fact, and it's not, Adam hasn't told me, I mean, I've heard through various channels that he's put a lot of blood, sweat and tears into fighting with the agent, fighting with Liverpool, fighting with the Premier League. So I think, he deserves an awful lot of credit personally for the way that he's battled for our club.
Yeah. And that's ultimately what we want. And sometimes I think because we don't do things out in the open, the fans don't know that, they don't see that, and they can get on him a little bit. And sometimes I think it's unfair, but it is what it is. And thankfully he was able to, I think it all worked out for the best for us. I think we have Van Dijk, and if he comes back and puts the shirt on and plays well, like you said, I think the fans will kind of get behind him. I think initially there'll be some boos, but if he plays well, if he's the Van Dijk of a year and a half ago, I think all is forgiven, at least while he's out there on the pitch. And, afterwards, and maybe after the season, then, maybe opinions will change and form over time. But, I think that's where we're at right now. Do you see us making additions to the squad in January to kind of improve that B- grade, whether it be at the attacking midfield position or the striker position? Or do you think we're going to maybe wait and see? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Historically, they've always made a point of saying that they're not a club that would suddenly shell out 30 million in January because they're desperate. That they always think about forward planning and they want to get their players in the summer and then have them all the way through to the season. I mean, you look at last season, they signed Gabbiadini in January for that exact reason, that they were struggling for goals. And, don't get me wrong, I really like Gabbiadini. I think he's an excellent player. I think, a lot of the frustration that we suffer as fans is some of the service he gets and some of the balls he's delivered just don't play to his strengths at all. So I think we have to obviously see how things go. I mean, you mentioned there about Tadic. For me, players like him are confidence players. If it starts going wrong, they lose that confidence. The fans get on their back, and it just doesn't help the situation. So for me, players like Tadic and Steve Davis need to have a better season than he did last season. Buffal needs to try and put pressure on Tadic to get into the team. Ward-Prowse needs to score more goals. All of those sort of players in and around the strikers need to do more. Now, if they can do that over the next 3-4 months, then obviously we're not going to improve in January. But I think it's naive to sort of think, look, if we were trying to sign players as of the close of the window in January, in August just gone, then we are still going to be looking to do that in January. So I think for me, they will have their eye on a few players. Whether they can get the deals done in January, it's well known that you tend to have to spend a bit more money than you want to. But right. I think it's going to be a case of seeing how the next few months go. I think we're all a little nervous again that we are where we were 12 months ago in terms of where the goal's going to come from. So at the moment, I would say, let's see how it goes. They may well invest in January, but if they have a really good 3-4 months now and everyone gels and suddenly Tadic is firing goals in and Buffal is and Long is and such like, then they're obviously not going to spend money for the sake of it. So, right. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. But at the moment, I would say they're obviously happy with what they've got. Yeah.
All right. I think that that does it for my kind of questions and things like that, unless you have another point you'd like to add.
Not at all.
All right. Well, have a good night, and I'm going to go get in the pool because it's hot.
Yeah, I was going to say, enjoy the swimming pool. See you later, mate. All right.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
And that was Ben Stanfield. Once again, if you don't follow him on Twitter, you can do that at Ben Stanners, and you can keep in touch with this podcast on Twitter at Total Saints Pod. Special thanks to Ben for being willing to chat with me, taking the time out of his Sunday evening to do that. And special thanks to all of the guests who appeared on today's show for at some point this weekend sitting down and communicating with me, whether you were in the middle of cooking lunch or getting ready for your kids to go back to school or just trying to stay out of the weather. Whatever you were doing, thank you for doing that. I really do appreciate it. And without you guys coming on and doing that, then the show wouldn't be happening. I wouldn't do it without the guests that come on each and every week. So thank you to you guys, and thank you to all the listeners out there for taking the time to download and subscribe. I appreciate it. Any feedback you have is always welcome. I look forward to hearing it. And if you don't follow the show on Twitter, maybe this is your first time listening, you can follow the show at SFCDELL_IVERY. And we're on Facebook at facebook.com/SFC Delivery. There's no underscore in the Facebook address. And if you haven't subscribed to our feed yet, you can do that on iTunes, Stitcher, Acast, Google Play, TuneIn Radio, or wherever else you get your podcast. Do that so you do not miss an episode. The next time you hear from me, we will be back with another guest to talk about another game. Southampton hosts Watford next weekend. The international break is almost over. We are very much looking forward to that. Hopefully we can continue to move forward. So with all of that being said, special thanks again to everybody who joined the show, everybody who listened. Any feedback you have, we'll take it. And if you like the show, consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. That really helps other people find out about the show. And it really is nice to hear nice things about the work that goes into these. So with all that being said, until next time, remember that together we march on.